Welcome to Leader U by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. Successful organizations are dependent on people being competent in their job. To prepare people to do the work, we must prepare them according to the skills, knowledge, and abilities required for the job, correctly and consistently. One of the services Black River offers is evaluating employee and candidate competencies. Our 25 competency assessment focuses on the soft skills, or what we like to call them, essential skills. Our competency assessment is used for more accurate hiring practices as well as for staff development. Every organization could use these competencies to ensure an individual's skills match the soft skills required by the job, to nurture the right talent, to improve productivity, and to develop dynamic leaders. For a sample of the 25 leadership competencies, definitions, and assessment, email us at info@blackriverpm.com. Today, I am continuing the conversation with my amazing guest, Diane Bevan. She is the founder and CEO of the National Women's Business Community Network Foundation and is driven by her passion for empowering women in entrepreneurship. With a focus on bridging inequities, she champions women-owned businesses, women-led nonprofits, and the nation's women business centers. As the former CEO of the Idaho Hispanic Chamber and Foundation, Diane recognized diverse communities' barriers and founded the Idaho Women's Business Center and the Idaho Connect programs. Her leadership secured nearly $10 million in grants for Idaho, catalyzing change. Diane's commitment to community service is evident as an urban renewal commissioner and the Idaho Rural Success Summit co-chair. Her dedication shines through her involvement in creating nonprofits, notably Idaho Women for Education. Her passion nonprofit focused on at-risk women and girls. She earned accolades like Idaho Business Review's Top 50 Women of the Year, CEO of Influence in 2021, and a spot among Idaho's top 50 most influential business leaders in 2022. She received the prestigious 2022 Marsha Bailey Leadership Award from the Association of Women's Business Centers. Diane loves it when her friends become friends and believes success is just one connection away. Thank you, Diane, for being on the Leader U podcast today and talking to us about the leadership competency influence. You have an incredible amount of influence around the people of the state and nationally, and I admire you so much in the work that you're doing. I want to talk and find out how you got this gift of influence and how you can share that gift and that leadership competency with other women. Well, not just women, but let's talk about influence. And first, I want to have you share a little bit about your story and we kind of did it a little bit in the last episode, but a little bit more as to maybe what you were thinking about doing versus what you actually are doing now in your life.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me back for a second episode. It's interesting when we talk about the word influence too, because it goes back, growing up in a house of 6 girls, and no brothers on a farm. God has a sense of humor because I was the one out there on the tractor and doing all the chores that I wish I would have had a big brother for. But when you're number 5 of 6 girls, you have to really kind of be loud to find your voice in a house. And so, I can remember at a young age, my dad would, and I didn't even know at the time, he'd say, "Boy, Diane, you could sell swampland in Florida." And I didn't even know what that meant. But now as an adult, I'm realizing he was telling me that I was an influencer. I can influence anyone to do anything. And I can remember the first time that I realized that I could use that ability for something good. And I was in high school, and my little high school, for whatever reason, didn't have a dance after the homecoming football game. And I went to the principal and I asked him, I said, "Well, how can we do that?" And he said, "Well, Diane, if you get enough signatures, we'll let you have a dance." So that whole week I sat in the hallway at lunch. I got all my signatures. I ended up getting to have the first homecoming dance, and my dad was the DJ. And I realized, okay, I had an idea. I found a solution. I used at the time I didn't realize my influence, and
Mm-hmm.
then good happen. And so I had, lots of instances of that throughout my life, and then realized that, I could use that gift to really open doors and make things happen. As you read my bio, and every time I hear that, and I think, gosh, how did this girl serve the Hispanic community for 6 years and then create a women's business center when, you know, a few years earlier, she was running a wedding event center in Burley, Idaho. My life has been a really interesting script. My husband worked in corporate world, and we moved every 4 to 5 years. So it was really hard for me to put down any, really good roots as far as entrepreneurship or even professionally, because I was the wife that kept going with the husband on the
Mm-hmm.
moves. But every time we moved somewhere, I would come up with some new initiative in that community to
Mm-hmm.
help and serve. And so it's just kind of been in my nature to look for those challenging situations that someone might think that that's never going to happen. I think that is also kind of what drives me to jump into these things. But when at the time that I became the CEO of the Hispanic Chamber, I never thought I would be running women's business centers and now serving women nationally. It's just, I think life is line upon line
Mm-hmm.
and precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, and then, and things just layer. I think the biggest thing that I could share about how my life of being an influencer has continually risen in my ability to serve others and to serve the underserved is that I've just been willing. Every morning I wake up as a willing participant in my own life,
Mm-hmm.
and I wake up saying, whatever is going to come my way, I'm going to face it. And if it's a challenge, I'm going to figure out how to get over it. And I think that I try to be guided by the needs that are around me versus always necessarily like what I thought my life was going to be.
Mm. Oh, that's so good. So good. Because when we start to, have these expectations and the four agreements, right? These expectations of what we think our life should be and not be open to life as it actually is, right? Life's going to happen. It's going to punch us in the face sometimes. It's going to knock us down. There's going to be people that don't like us. There's going to be people that tell us we can't do the things that we want to do. We're not good enough. We're not smart enough. But those people don't know what you're capable of. And so not listening to those, I think I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast, but my high school counselor actually told me I wasn't smart enough to go to college. So that was something that, you know, I'm very grateful that I have kind of a strong, I would say, I have a fire in me to kind of not let other people tell me what I can and can't do. High FU factor is what I would call it.
It's so true. I think that it's just that, and not everyone has that ingrained in them, but that I think you and I have already determined that we have a lot of similarities
Yeah.
in what this, but the best way well, an activator and maximizer are
Yeah.
in my top five strengths. And so
Yeah.
it's like, give me a challenge. I actually thrive better when there's a challenge, but I would love to know for our listeners, it doesn't mean that I don't fail. Like I have
Mm.
failed hard and I have cried hard and I've created things that I have and that's one of the things about working in the nonprofit world. You don't always have control over the things that you create, and it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It, you know, but I do believe that you just have to keep going. You
Yeah.
have to see the good and celebrate the wins and realize but we learn more from our trials than we ever do from our wins.
Absolutely. And not be embarrassed of the failures and just to be part of the journey. Nobody who's been actually successful in life hasn't failed first or hasn't failed multiple times. It might look glossy and glamorous on social media or what you see somebody doing now and think, I could never do that. Anyone could do the things. It's just a matter of persistence and learning and growing and constantly not giving up and just and finding someone that believes in you, surrounding yourself with people that do believe in you and they're willing to help you get to the next step, or like you say, that one connection away from success. I love that.
Yeah. I can remember when I owned the wedding event center. I also owned two prom and bridal retail stores. I don't think I've ever shared that with you, but for about 8 years I owned these retail stores, and I had never owned retail before. And I remember the first time I started buying wedding dresses and prom dresses, I was like reliving the dresses I never got to have, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like ordering $40,000 of all these. I didn't even realize what inventory management was, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I fell really hard because I was spending so much money. And then the next season, the girls weren't wearing hot pink and lime green anymore. The colors had changed, and I had all this inventory. And I can just remember, like, and I think that you just have to realize, okay, now what am I going to do about it? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's a question that we all have to ask ourselves when we fail hard or fail fast or even fail slow. We're like, okay, what's the next right decision that I can make?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, my back room of my retail stores were so full of these brand new dresses that nobody wanted, because they weren't in style. And I would try to, run the clearance sales. And then at some point, you still have like this room. And when you talk about, one of the reasons I say that success is one connection away is there was a day that this woman came in and with her daughter, and I happened to get into a conversation with her about this enormous amount of things. And she goes, I work with a nonprofit that takes a barge down to South Africa, and you can send anything. And she's like, they would take every one of those dresses. They will take the netting from the wedding dress and sift the water. They will take the satin from the prom dresses and wrap their babies in them. And so all of a sudden, I had a way to clean out the back room, send 75 boxes of wedding and prom dresses. And I asked her, like, should I take out some of that bulk, And she's
Mm.
like, no, they will use every morsel of everything that you send. And it was about actually a year later that someone sent me a picture of this wedding that was like four couples in South Africa, and they were wearing the wedding dresses from my store. And so I tell you
Wow.
that story because I was in tears, I was in debt, I had all of these dresses, but then something really good came out of the surplus.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you just have to think about, well, here's where I'm at. Maybe I did make the right choice.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I'm at. And now what do I need to do to move forward?
And don't you think like we regret more? Well, I know for sure by reading the research on regret, we actually regret the chances we don't take more than we regret the mistakes that we've made.
Yeah. And I think that that's why, I love that, as I work with coaches, I have mentors, I
Yeah.
have life
Yeah.
coaches, I've seen, and every time I talk about something bad, I'm like, Diane, that's an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And that word, and I'm like, oh, that's so cliche, but it's like, I have to continually remind myself that there are opportunities out of everything that happens in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
good or bad.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Opportunities and possibilities. It's just when we get stuck in our mindsets or we get stuck in victim mode or we get to the point of, I'm not good enough, I'll never make it, and that self-loathing, that's when we don't. And it's okay to hit it for a minute, and it's okay. We say in our house, you got 24 hours, like cry it out, suck it up, get to the point where you move through those emotions, get rid of it. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be upset and to work through it. But like, we don't want to live there. We want to get to the place where, all right, yesterday was a rough day. How am I going to face today? What am I going to learn from this? How can I move forward? And take that right next indicated step. Like you said, what's the best thing I can do today? Because I don't know how I'm going to clean all this mess up, but I'm open to possibilities. I'm open to opportunities. I'm open to meeting the right person today that could change my life forever.
What I love about, thank you for that. What I love about working with women and women entrepreneurs, women founders, is that I have learned just sheerly by doing and seeing the results of using this platform, the Women's Business Centers, and gathering the women in Idaho and having big events and giving them opportunities to make these connections that we've talked about. But it's using this influence that I've created. So I think once you realize that you're at this level of what someone would call an influencer, where
Mm.
people will open your emails, they will read what you send them, they will answer your calls. So you have a due diligence to use that superpower to uplift the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
When you make those email connections, I always put a lot of enthusiasm. I say, I just love it when my friends become friends. And I know that you guys are going to be such a great connection. And yeah, okay, yeah, maybe it puts a little pressure on one to reach out to the other, but I only do it when I really feel like that's the connection that they need to have. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that, but I think all women have that. I
Mm-hmm.
think that when you're interacting with each other, you have to be a good listener and think about, how can I help that person today versus what is in it for me?
Mm-hmm.
And when you go into any networking or events or conversation, whatever that gathering is, if you go into that room thinking, I want to learn as much as I can about everybody else in that room, that's how you become an influencer. It's all about knowledge and connections.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I think that a little bit of it is an ingrained superpower that
Mm-hmm.
I have, but at the same time, I do believe that all women have that in them if they just start kind of changing that mindset of, how can I serve? How can I be a giver? Because then, you're given in return.
Oh, I love that. That actually goes along with Adam Grant's research on his book is called Give and Take. And there's givers and there's takers and there's matchers. And I think what I see in you is you're a giver. And that means a giver of time, a giver of your gifts. And I really do. I know for a fact that that is something that actually does build relationships. We live in a very transactional society where it's like, what can I get for you? What can you get for me? But I've really found that the most joy in life comes from when you're serving others, and when you are helping others to get where they want to be, and you're doing that good work. I feel like that's the most soul filling, the most spiritual work that we can do, because we are all connected regardless. When we do good for other people, there's a ripple effect to that type of stuff. And I love you sharing that point because I think it's so important. And when you do have influence, it's a responsibility, right?
It is. It is. I'm actually working on my first book, and it's called Diversified Influence, because I think we do have this responsibility to also, create this inclusive environment. We talked a lot about this, I think, in our first
Mm-hmm.
podcast together, about the inequities for the underserved and those from diverse communities. But diversified influence isn't just about demographics; it's also about your network,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I love the signature event that I host every year. And regardless of what platform I'm in, there will always be a state of women in Idaho on a
Mm-hmm.
big stage. And
Mm-hmm.
each year we have about 350 people in the room, the governor on the stage. So it's a combination of entrepreneurs, stakeholders, elected officials.
Mm-hmm.
It's that event that has that diversified influence all in one room. The governor needs an opportunity to speak to the entrepreneurs. They need to hear him. He needs to be there. They need to see that he supports. They need an opportunity to connect with each other. And so when you can create, whether it's virtually or in person or just in conversation, if the more diverse your network around you is, the better you can serve, the better you can give, and also the better you can grow.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the putting a round peg in a square box, right? We don't want to all, like, I don't want a group of all squares or all circles. Like, I want to have every shape.
Absolutely. And
And
I even think about diversity of personality and thought, right? So yesterday we were looking at your disc profile and your driving forces, and you're a high
yeah,
DI, so you get stuff done, and you love to be, you're outgoing, super extroverted. So that's part of D is your dominance and I is your influence. And both of those were, really high up there. So that is just even in you, nature. Forget about the nurture. That's the stuff that your dad saw about you early on, right? Like you could sell swampland to someone in Florida.
yeah, apparently so.
Yeah, I was told I could sell ketchup popsicles to a woman in white gloves, and that was from Tommy Boy, but somebody has told me that too, and it's like, yeah, when well, I'm a promoter, and that is something that is just in natural to me. That's the wheelhouse that I live in, and I think that I have influence as it relates to women in business, being part of Business Women of Pocatello, being part of You Women United, which is actually it's an affinity group of United Way, and it's serving underprivileged and in the education, women and children. And then also Zonta is another group that I'm speaking on, Zonta International, and that's about diversity, inclusion, equity for women. And those are all groups that I feel like are championing the mission that I have for helping other women too. So I think that's how we're aligned. We both spend a lot of time and influence in helping and growing the next generation of leaders. And as we said before, kind of finding the gems that they are, polishing them up and getting them ready to serve their communities, to serve their families, to serve their workplace, to serve their business, their communities. They can do so much better if they have that support and people that believe in them.
Yeah, you're talking about some of your passion nonprofits that you work with. And back in 2020, I just felt really inspired to create a nonprofit called Idaho Women for Education. And it was just literally four people, four women. We created this nonprofit, and I knew that it was going to do something great. I had a good friend that I asked her to be the president of this nonprofit, not really even knowing. I just wanted to help women, obviously, Idaho Women for Education, but I still I knew that time would unfold. And now we're working on our very first pilot program for reentry. And it was interesting when I just felt really inspired that we needed to address women transitioning out of incarceration, not even knowing that this woman I had selected 3 years ago served on the Department of Corrections. And her husband is a prison guard. Didn't know any of those things at the time. And, the more I talk about it, the more people have reached out and said, how can we be part of the solution? Fun fact, Idaho has the highest percentage of women incarcerated by population. And they've had that number one spot for a number of years. And I was really shocked to find that out as well. And so, as I've been looking at how can we be part of that solution, obviously there's some amazing women leaders that made some choices that put them where they're at today, but it doesn't mean that they can't make good choices and make changes. And so we're looking at some different opportunities for this pilot. It'll launch sometime in the next year. But I just think that, to your point, once you get to that point where you do have the time to serve, really using that influence to really change, it'll be, multi-generational, life-changing with some of the women that we work with.
I want to know. I want to be a part of that. I can tell you that right now. That is the one thing that's changed my life is education. I'm the first college grad in my family. I was born to a 16-year-old mom. And I faced 8 out of 10 ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So if you take the test, I had 8 out of 10 of them. And so the odds for me weren't very good. But what I have learned is that education is the game changer. And one of the things that I've also been able to do when I said I've helped people out of incarceration and then in education is when I was in the education role, working at ISU, I was involved in a part of the START program. And I'll get into that a little bit more at another time, but it's a college prep program that is actually funded by the Albertsons Foundation. It's free one semester where they learn their math, their English, the skills that they need to do so that they can, they can be successful. But when I came over, I brought emotional intelligence to that program. And now Charisse Brown, she's one of my dear friends, she's the director. She's consistently teaching emotional intelligence to those students. And they say it is by far the most important skill that they wish they had known. And it's been life-saving and life-changing. So some have even said that the tools that they've learned have actually helped them from suicide, like from making those kinds of decisions. So that's one of the things, the platforms that I like to do to help people is to understand their emotions better, have a language about it, understand how to regulate. Because when we grow up in trauma, we have a trauma response to everything as far as feeling like we're in fight or flight, and learning to understand and process those emotions and learning regulation skills. Anyone can learn these skills. I did not have them at all growing up because anger was the language that I learned, and that was the one emotion that I was okay to show. And being vulnerable was not a thing that you did. But as I've learned, I learned the wrong. I learned I learned tools that weren't going to help me be successful. And as I grew, I started to see that I actually had this superpower of being people smart and understanding people and interactions and how people felt and empathy and all of these things. And I could see patterns. And that's when I started to study more about understanding human behavior. And that is what I want to bring to people. It's understanding themselves better so that they can lead better. And I'm not talking about positional leadership. I don't care if you're a stay-at-home mom. You're a leader. You're a leader of your family. You're a leader of the community. You do stuff in the classrooms. Whatever you participate in, you're a leader. Because let's be honest, positional power is not that much influence. We listen to our friends much more than we listen to, and to society much more than we listen to somebody in power, in a power position.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that we've been studying are some of these other reentry programs that women's business centers have been running in other states, and it started out as let's go in and teach entrepreneurial classes, but it's really the emotional intelligence, the strengths classes, the learning about how I show up in a situation that might have been maybe the reason that I ended up incarcerated, and how to be aware of the strengths and the opportunities for growth. And so I couldn't agree with you more, Angie. I think learning, the more that I do learn, and obviously the more time I've spent with you, when you sent me my report, I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty accurate to how I show up in situations. And having my own amount of trauma in my home. They were married 53 years, but he was physically abusive all 53. And so, sometimes we got on the end of that, and just learning how that has affected how my brain works and how I show up. And but then also recognizing that that has given me some empathy, and it certainly has given me a desire to help other women that maybe haven't been as fortunate as me to find my path. And so I think that there's so much good that we can do, and we just have, and we have, and I hate to say that we have, what is it? What is the saying that says with responsibility? That's the word. Like we have a responsibility to just try to help the world be a better place. And I think that that's just part of being on this earth, is just looking for where do we land in our space, and how can we use our influence to just better the space that we get to touch.
Right. I mean, we have things that are within our control, and then we have the ability to influence. Some of the things we have to control are, ourself, and we're not even very good at that. But we have the ability to influence certain things that we care about, inequities. And I think when we're doing that and we're living within our soul and what our heart's desire, and we're stepping in, even though we're scared and we don't know the next step. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I know that I feel like I need to be here. I need to be showing up for this. I need to be speaking at this event. I don't know. You just follow that. The path just becomes more available because you don't know all the answers. You just know in your soul that this feels like the right thing to do right now. And how, if I feel like I'm in that and I'm living in that, then I feel like that's where influence comes from. It doesn't come from what I buy or what I wear or any of that stuff. Like, that's all so shallow. And it's nice to feel, you can dress up for things, but it's like, that's not going to be the point. The point's going to be, where's my heart? And how can I connect with somebody? If I can connect with them, then that's how I can influence them in a way that would be positive for their life.
That's really good. As I've been doing research and thinking about, writing a book on diversified influence, and thinking about, how does influence start? How does it grow? How do you become an influencer, as well as how can you influence? And it's been, when I kind of assess, the last 5, 6 years of my life, and how, I only moved to the Boise area in 2015. And I'm now at that level where I can, get a governor to come speak at an event.
Yeah.
And so I think about, how did that happen? And I will tell you that the misconception that I had is that I needed to try to act like an influencer instead of focusing on influence. And so when I think about not necessarily putting myself on a stage or putting myself in front, but linking arms with who I determined were already influencers.
Mm-hmm.
And as I create this friendship and relationship, and together we support X, or together we help her,
Mm-hmm.
together we help solve. And
Right.
when you become continually part of a solution, part of a, bringing $10 million of taxpayer money back to your state that you live in, when you do that, like, you become an influencer, but not because you're driving for it. It's
Yes.
because just you're influencing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's really important, like, as people listen to this podcast and think, well, I want to be an influencer. How can I, do that? And I would say that, and I know that you're, because I've been on your podcast before, you're going to ask me more for my three things. So I can either save them or share some of them now. But I think that, when you first hear the word influencer, our mind tends to go to people of affluence, right? So popular people, people in high positions, anyone can be an influencer. You just have to recognize, what can you do to help other people grow, and then they see you as this person of influence, and then that just continually allows you to grow in that space.
Oh,
And
I
that's how
love
you
it.
strengthen that tool.
I love that. The difference between having affluence and being an influencer. I think of Instagram when you think of influencer, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about selling products. We're not talking about, makeup or anything like that. We're talking about life, people's lives, and their businesses and their homes and their communities. We're talking about making the world a better place. And how can we be an influencer to use our skills and our talents for good in a way that uplifts everyone around us?
That's exactly right. We need to change the narrative even around the definition.
I love that. And so let's hear your tips for you. That was just a great tip as far as do the influencing, do the work to influence good things, and you will be the influencer. It's not by being an influencer. It's not something you just go. It was kind of like being a thought leader. I was having this conversation the other day. I even Googled it, how does one become a thought leader? Because do you just put it on your LinkedIn profile and now you're a thought leader? Or how does one become a thought leader? I was having this conversation with some friends, and what it is other people in their realm say they are a thought leader. So it takes other people to believe that you're a thought leader. So you see this thought leader. Well, okay, that means people in respectable positions like theirs, let's say Adam Grant, he's the thought leader. So academics and organizations see him as a thought leader. And I think influence is kind of like that. Yeah, we could be an influencer because we all have influence. We all have the ability, but I think the people that are powerful at it and really good at it are serving other people. They're influencing them in good ways, and other people see them as an influencer because they see the good work that they're doing. They see they're consistent. They see that they align with their values too.
That's all really good. Some of that is really kind of what I would consider some of my, top three things that I would give. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's hear them. Yeah.
So when I think about, even, as I would say, my top word of advice would be to really think about how the listeners, what is their definition of an influencer today? Like, when they started listening to this podcast and started to engage with us in our stories, did the narrative change for them? Because I would say the same thing about influencer as I would thought leader, right? Is like, I've never gone into my life or into my day or into my way thinking, I'm going to see what I can do to influence people today.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you really want to make change in the world, you have to be strategic. And I think strategy and influence, go hand in hand together. Like, I have to intentionally take actionable steps to create a relationship with people that have power, that can make decisions, that can, fund grants, that can, make change in the capital. And having that relationship And sometimes I don't even know when I need to draw back on that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's 3 years that I'm going, wow, I made a decision 3 years ago that really hasn't allowed me to influence in that area till today. And so I think that you know, you have to be a people person. You have to be willing to have those conversations that and get to know people on a real level.
Yeah.
And I think that as you become an authentic influencer, it just means that you are taking actionable steps to create real relationships that aren't necessarily for your own benefit. It's just because you need to know people that can influence. And I don't even know if that makes sense. It's like it's kind of hard to describe.
It is.
It
But
is a hard. It's kind of like hard to describe. What is a thought leader? You know,
mm,
it is, but it's something that just kind of becomes through time,
mm-hmm.
consistency. The second thing that I would say is that even though I think, you know, we've talked a lot about women today and women leaders and women emerging leaders that are thinking about uh, really making change and stepping into those roles. I think you have to be willing to step into a role.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be my second thing, is be willing to be on that committee, be willing to sit on a board, be willing to give up your time, because that is ultimately too how you start to build your own personal credibility to your brand.
Mm-hmm.
You are. And I think that you have to, you know, you talked about some of the ones that you serve on. You have to be willing. You have to be willing to give up your time.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing is really try to look at what your own 5-year plan is and reverse engineer it. You know, if you want to go save a small island, you need to start working on it now. If you want to create a nonprofit that's successful, that does something, then what actionable steps can you take today? And I think that, you know, I've always really tried to ask myself, what does success look like for me at the end of the year? And I need to start working on that today. And that is kind of also how you think about where do you lie in the topic of influence.
Yes, I love that. Such good stuff. I'm going to call you a thought leader. So I don't know if I'm credible, but just know that you're a thought leader in my eyes. That's
Oh,
really,
you're so. Well, I had my kickoff event last Wednesday, and I have to share this because it was really a mic drop moment in a webinar. It was a virtual kickoff for my event, and just kind of learn a little bit more about my platform. And someone that I've known for a while, and she runs a nonprofit. She doesn't live close to me, but I know her. She made this. They were each doing their introductions, and she said, "If Diane were boiling water, I would want to stand there and learn how." And I thought that I haven't even called her to tell her what that meant to me to hear that, but
yeah.
it meant a lot because it meant that she trusts that whatever I would teach her, I would not lead her astray.
And
That's
that's
what I read into
what a
that.
gift that you give to people that they just want to be around you to feel your fire and to that is influence. That is exactly the definition of influence, where people just want to be around you because they learn more, they feel good around you, they feel like anything's possible. They know that, you know, any hurdles you're going to have possible solutions for. That right there is just you're being a helper. And you're
Yeah,
not willing to just say no, just be shot down when people tell you no or we can't do that. You'll find an alternative solution.
yeah. And that goes back to my rule number 2. You have to be willing to work and to sit on those committees and be involved in the solutions. You know, I think when you are a person from a privileged race and you have a desire to serve diverse communities, you can't make promises you won't keep. You can't talk the talk and not walk the walk. If
Mm,
you want to earn the trust of our underserved and under-resourced women in business, you have to walk with them. You
mhm,
have to drive to their communities. You have to sit at the table, hold their hand, and say, I got you.
mhm,
And it's not easy and it takes time.
mhm.
And so I think that part of becoming a real authentic influencer is it's not just likes and shares on Facebook or Instagram.
No. Oh, you're talking. This is what I love. This is actually having meaningful conversation also makes you an influencer. We can't just sit here and talk about things that don't matter to have any influence. about what color we're going to paint our kitchen, or just sometimes I just need deep, deep conversations about the world and what we need to do. That will also help. Be brave enough to have a conversation that matters.
Yeah.
And be willing and courageous enough to know that there's going to be other people that are going to join elbows with you when they hear what's in your heart and in your soul. Share what's in your heart and your soul. Don't be afraid to take the step forward. Find people that are doing it already. If you're not sure where to start, literally, you have a website. People can contact you. You're going to have a book. I mean, you're easy to find.
So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
You're doing amazing work, and you're changing lives. I'm one of the lucky ones that have been the recipient of your emotional intelligence coaching, and I can definitely say I've benefited greatly. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I really want to join arms with you in ways that you see my talents needed. And so whatever I can do, I'm just a phone call, a text away now. So I want our friends to become friends. I want to make connections for you, and let's influence our state and our nation, and change the trajectory.
Yeah. I always like to say, together we make change, and, together we rise, and together we make impact. And it truly is, we cannot do this on our own.
Mm-mm. Nope.
We are absolutely strong when we draw on each other's strengths.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you so
Have an amazing day. And when I come to Boise next, I might need to see if I can come drop by the couch.
You may have to just come drop by the couch.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Diane.
You're so welcome.
Did you know that Black River offers a learning management system with over 10,000 development topics? The Leader U Learning Management System is an affordable option that empowers organizations to manage and curate in-house learning development opportunities. The built-in calendar and scheduling system can be used to coordinate compliance courses such as HR Respectful Workplace and IT Cybersecurity, or lunch and learns on topics such as motivation, self-leadership, and leading more effective meetings. At Black River, we are dedicated to providing a learning solution that focuses on engaging employees in their own self and team development. Our clients use the Leader U Learning Management System to remove barriers through accessible and self-paced micro-learning content, save time with the centralized and automated training assignments, promote more meaningful team discussions, issue certificates of completion and track development efforts, and enhance and simplify onboarding efforts. Contact us for more information on our learning management system at info@blackriverpm.com.